My parents handed my sister a check for $120,000 on her wedding day and smiled as if they were doing something perfectly natural, not generous. Not extraordinary, just expected. Guests clapped politely. Someone raised a glass. My mother dabbed at her eyes as though she were watching a dream come true. Toward me. Then my father turned toward me. Number. His expression didn't harden. His voice didn't rise. Tade. It stayed even, composed, almost gentle, the tone he used when delivering news he believed could not be argued with. You've made different choices, he said. You can't expect the same kind of support. You don't deserve our help. No one gasped. No one spoke up. Tie me. The music continued playing softly in the background. 9. And in that moment, something inside me settled, not broke, not exploded, but settled into place with a clarity I had never known before. This wasn't about money. It never had been. It was a verdict that had been forming quietly for years, finally spoken out loud in front of witnesses. Not. That was the night I walked out of my parents' house and cut every remaining line connecting us. Comics. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the driveway. Tane. I didn't ask anyone to follow me. I just left, carrying the calm realization that whatever family meant to them, it no longer included me. Do it. From that night on, I built my life in silence. No calls. No holiday texts. No updates. Passed through relatives who didn't want to get involved. Just work, resolve, and the slow, deliberate process of surviving without approval. 3 years later, my sister slowed her car in front of my $1.5 million home, sat there longer than she meant to, and then pulled over to the side of the street, died. She called our mother crying, her voice shaking as she asked the question she had never prepared herself to ask. How does Emily have all of this? When I did everything right? But the real twist wasn't the house she saw that afternoon. It was what she never expected to find waiting behind the front door. I grew up in a family where love was never unconditional, daughters. It was implied through approval, distributed through achievement, and quietly withdrawn when expectations weren't met. From the outside, the Carter family looked stable, respectable, successful. My father was a senior surgeon at a private hospital. My mother taught business ethics at a local college. Our home sat in a quiet suburb outside Boston, the kind of place where neighbors waved but never asked personal questions. At the center of everything stood my older sister, Claire. Claire was the kind of person who seemed to arrive in the world already aligned with it. Teachers admired her. Adults trusted her. My parents spoke her name with warmth, as if saying it reassured them that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. And then there was me. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't irresponsible. I didn't embarrass them. I simply wasn't her. When relatives asked about me, my mother smiled politely and said the same thing every time. Emily is very independent. Independent was the word they used when there was nothing else to praise. I learned early not to ask for much. I started working at 16, splitting my time between school and long shifts at a small diner a few towns over. I saved my tips in a cracked ceramic jar under my bed, counting and recounting them as if they were proof that I existed. Tinets. I paid for my own clothes, my own books, my own gas, daughterming. When I left for college, it was in a used car I bought myself, the engine rattling whenever I stopped at a light. Claire left in a new sedan my father proudly parked in the driveway while neighbors watched. Memories. Some memories arrive softly, like dust floating in sunlight. Others cut clean and sharp. Tint. I remember sitting at the dining table, the smell of roasted chicken filling the room, while my parents spoke animatedly about Claire's achievements. When the conversation shifted to me, the tone changed lighter, polite, almost distracted. She's very self-sufficient, my mother said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. Self-sufficient was their way of saying overlooked, detailed. By my early 20s, I had built a steady career in marketing. Nothing flashy, just Long hours, quiet competence, and the satisfaction of knowing I was good at what I did. I understood people. I understood stories. 10. I understood how to make someone feel seen. Clients noticed, even if my parents didn't. My mother tolerated my job the way one tolerates background noise. You could have chosen something more meaningful, she'd sigh, already imagining a different version of me. Day. It was around that time that Mark entered my life. Mark was a software engineer with a calm presence and a habit of listening all the way through before responding. Ducks. He didn't see me as the lesser sister or the unfinished project. He saw my ambition, my exhaustion, my quiet determination. With him, I didn't feel measured, down. I made the mistake of hoping my family would see him the same way. Dasksis. The first holiday I brought Mark home, the air in the room shifted the moment we walked in. My father sized him up in seconds. Day. My mother asked polite questions that carried subtle evaluations. Claire, glowing in her engagement ring, offered a distracted smile before launching into a story about her fiancé's connections and future plans. I smiled through dinner, swallowing the familiar tightness in my chest. Night. Later that night, my father tapped his glass and gave a speech celebrating Claire's upcoming wedding. His voice was warm, full of pride. Tensus. I listened carefully, searching for even a hint of that warmth turning in my direction. It never did. Dinner. The breaking point came weeks later, disguised as a Sunday dinner my parents insisted was just to talk. Mark and I arrived with a bottle of wine and cautious optimism. The table was set simply. No flowers, no celebration. My father barely looked up when we entered. Teed. After stiff small talk, I mentioned that Mark and I were planning to get married. Dees. I said we wanted something small, something meaningful, and that we hoped they might want to be involved. Day. My father set his mug down slowly. 9. And what exactly are you asking for? Mark leaned forward, steady. We're not asking for money, just support. My mother folded her hands. Support means respecting family standards. Claire understands that. Tation. The comparison landed cleanly, sharpened by years of repetition. Dollars. We're not asking for $120,000. My father exhaled through his nose. Your sister has aligned her life with our values. You haven't. Naomi. Then he looked directly at me and said the words that ended everything. You don't deserve our help. Duplicate. The sentence didn't hurt because it was cruel. Noun. It hurt because it confirmed what I had always known. I placed my napkin on the table and stood. We should go. No one stopped us. Numbers. The next morning, I blocked their numbers, left the family group chat, and walked forward into a life where I would never again wait to be chosen. Ness. And for the first time, the silence felt like relief. Tax. The silence didn't arrive all at once. It settled gradually, like dust after a storm, filling spaces I hadn't realized were empty. Now, at first, I kept expecting something to break inside me, regret, guilt, the sudden urge to explain myself to people who had never truly listened. Days. But days passed, then weeks, and instead of pain, there was something else. Dan, there was space. Time. I woke up without bracing myself for judgment. I made decisions without imagining how they would sound at a dinner table I no longer sat at. Tane. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head that would never happen. The quiet wasn't lonely. It was clean. Mark noticed the change before I did. One morning, as we sat at the small kitchen table in our apartment, sunlight cutting through the blinds in narrow stripes, He watched me stir my coffee absent-mindedly and said, "You're different, different." I looked up. Different how? "You're not waiting anymore," he said gently. The words landed softly but stayed with me. He was right, Neski. For most of my life, I had been waiting for approval, for acknowledgement, for someone to say I had finally done enough. Now, without realizing it, I had stopped. I poured myself into my work, not as an escape, but as an expression of something I had been holding back for years. I spoke up in meetings. I pitched ideas I would have once dismissed as too bold. I took on responsibility without asking whether I was allowed to. People noticed. Within months, I was leading projects that used to intimidate me. Clients began requesting me by name, not because of who my parents were, not because of where I came from, but because I delivered, because I listened. Details, because I cared about the details others skipped. For the first time, my value wasn't debated, it was visible. When the opportunity came to start something of my own, I didn't hesitate. The idea had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind, waiting for the moment when fear no longer outweighed desire. I partnered with 2 colleagues who believed in my vision, and together we rented a cramped office above a dry cleaner on a busy street downtown. The space was far from glamorous. The carpet was thin, the heating unreliable, and the windows rattled whenever it rained. But every morning when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I felt something I had never felt before: ownership. We worked long hours. We made mistakes. We celebrated small wins with cheap takeout eaten straight from the containers. Distant. There were nights when I went home exhausted, doubting myself, wondering if I had finally overestimated what I could handle. Mark was there for all of it. He stayed up with me during late nights, listening as I talked through problems out loud. He reminded me to eat when I forgot, never asked me, to slow down or be smaller. He didn't need me to prove anything. The first time our company turned a real profit, I sat alone in my office after everyone else had left, staring at the numbers on my screen. They didn't feel real. I waited for the impulse to call my parents, to share the news, to finally say, "Look, I did it." The impulse never came. That realization surprised me more than the success itself. Time passed. Slowly, then all at once. One contract led to another. One recommendation turned into 3. Investors reached out. People wanted meetings. They wanted to know how we thought, how we worked, how we saw the future. When Mark proposed, it wasn't elaborate. There was no crowd, no speech, no carefully staged moment. We were standing on our apartment balcony, the city humming below us, when he held out a simple ring and said, "I want a life that doesn't cost us ourselves." I cried, not because of the ring, but because for the first time someone was choosing me without conditions. We got married quietly. No spectacle, no comparisons, just people who showed up because they wanted to be there. The house came later. We didn't buy it to impress anyone. We didn't buy it as proof. We bought it because it felt right, because it had light, because it had space, nestered, because when I walked through it, I didn't feel evaluated. The first night we spent there, the rooms were mostly empty. Our footsteps echoed softly as we moved through the space. I stood in the living room, watching the last of the sunlight fade through the windows, and felt something shift inside me. I had built this, not to prove anything, not to win, just to live. I didn't know that. Miles away, someone else had just learned my address. The first sign came from a neighbor named Sarah, a woman I'd waved to occasionally but never spoken to beyond polite greetings. She texted me one quiet Saturday morning. "Hey, this might sound strange, but was your sister just driving past your house?" My hand froze around my phone. Before I could reply, another message came through. She slowed down, stopped for a bit, just stared. Then she drove off. A familiar chill worked its way up my spine. 3 years of silence, and this was how it resurfaced. Later that afternoon, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen since the night everything broke. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. My mother's voice sounded thinner than I remembered, less certain. "We think it's time we talked," she said. I didn't ask why. I already knew. Claire had seen the house. They wanted to visit, to reconnect. to start fresh. I agreed. Not because I owed them anything, but because I no longer feared what they might say. Neutra. Saturday arrived bright and clear, the kind of day that feels intentional. Mark and I set coffee and pastries out on the patio. Neutral, polite. Nothing that invited intimacy, nothing that suggested distance. Died. When security called to announce their arrival, my heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It stayed steady. The black sedan rolled up the driveway slowly. My father stepped out first, posture rigid, his hair grayer than I remembered. My mother followed, her smile stretched thin. Claire stepped out last, doesn't. She looked smaller somehow, clutching her purse like an anchor. I opened the door. Come in. My mother's eyes moved quickly, taking in the space, the light, the details she hadn't expected. Your home is lovely, she said. Noted. Let's sit outside. We settled onto the patio, sunlight glinting off the railing. For a moment, no one spoke. The quiet felt deliberate. My father cleared his throat. We're glad you agreed to see us. You chose the silence, I replied calmly. My mother leaned forward. Families make mistakes, but we're here now. Nay. I studied her face, searching for something I once needed desperately. Why? Dane. She hesitated. Because we miss you. Dodd. The words hovered between us, almost convincing. Dost. Then my father spoke. We've had some financial difficulties. Of course. W. He explained the lawsuit, the settlement, the strain. My mother added details about Claire's husband's business, how things hadn't turned out as planned. Claire stared at her hands, silent. Day. Finally, she looked up. We thought maybe you could help, not love, not regret, need. My father named the number carefully, as if moderation would make it reasonable. $200,000 would get us through this. No anger, no triumph, only clarity. You didn't come because you missed me, I said quietly. You came because you saw my house, because you realized I built something without you. Too bait, my mother gasped. Claire's eyes filled with tears. My father leaned forward. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. You taught me to earn everything myself, so I did. Claire's voice shook. We're still family. I softened, then not for her, but for the child she carried. I'm not giving you money, I said gently, but I will do one thing. Deed. They all looked up. Number 1. I'll set up an education fund for your child, in their name only. No access for anyone else. Next times. Silence followed. My father scoffed. You think you can dictate terms? I'm not dictating, I replied. I'm choosing boundaries. Tax. I stood. Mark opened the door. They left, one by one. My father stiff with anger, my mother stunned into quiet. Claire paused, turned back, and whispered, Thank you, Dodd. When the car disappeared down the hill, I finally exhaled. Note, the house felt different afterward, lighter, as if something long trapped had finally been released. I waited for guilt to arrive, for doubt to creep in. Never did. News. Instead, there was steadiness. Me. My parents didn't call again, not to argue, not to apologize. Silence, this time, felt like acceptance of a truth they could no longer bend. Claire sent a short message thanking me for the fund. Nothing more, nothing less. It was the first time she had spoken to me without comparison in her voice. Life moved forward. Work continued to grow. Our company expanded. Mark and I settled into routines that didn't carry old wounds. Niz. Some mornings I sat on the patio with my coffee, looking out over the hills, thinking about how close I'd come to shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. Instead, I built something bigger, something mine. I learned that family isn't defined by blood, money, or approval. It's defined by who shows up with love that doesn't need to be earned. Tend it. And real revenge isn't cruelty. Never touch. It's peace they can never touch. Capacity. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, you already understand what that decision costs. Some people believe you should always go back. Others believe leaving is the only way to survive, so I want to hear from you. Tani. If you believe choosing your peace is worth it, comment 1. New. If you believe family should always come first, no matter the cost, comment 0. D. I read the comments because behind every number is a story that sounds a lot like this one. No. And if this story stayed with you longer than you expected, you already know why you're here.